Thank you.
Make sure this guy's on. Hello.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. We're about to get started. I want to first thank you all for being here today. For those of you who don't know me, I am Vanessa Garrett Harley, Deputy Managing Director for Criminal Justice and Public Safety for the City of Philadelphia. We're all here to talk about a subject and a topic that is very important and very near and dear to my heart, and I'm sure to the heart of most of you who are here, and that is the gun violence in the city and trying to come up with strategic ways as to how we can reduce it and hopefully prevent it moving forward. Gun violence has a dramatic impact on all Philadelphians. It's particularly devastating to individuals, families, and the communities in where the violence occurs. The impact and the volume of the gun violence in Philadelphia is so severe that we're now in the midst of a public health crisis. The mayor, as you recall, issued a call to action on violence prevention at the end of September and gave us 100 days for his cabinet and his leadership to get a plan on his desk, a task that we took to heart and moved as quickly as we could. That set into motion the convening of a very large work group that was an interdisciplinary, interagency work group consisting of most of the leadership of the top city departments who would be involved in this type of work. And over the last 3 months, that work developed into the report and the plan that some of you now hold in your hands that we call the Philadelphia Roadmap to Safer Communities. It is very much a roadmap. It has very broad goals, overall strategies, and a series of specific recommendations. If implemented, we believe that this plan can dramatically reduce shootings and homicides in the city over the next 5 years. This is a plan that we have worked very strategically with both the police department, members of the city, the community, and others to try to come up with. In a few minutes, you'll hear from Theron Pride. He's the Senior Director of the Violence Prevention Office, and his title specifically around strategies and initiatives and programs. And he's going to walk you through and give everyone sort of a quick review of the roadmap. I know that Mayor Kenney is very much committed to this plan. The government is committed, and we all approach this task with the urgency that is required as we recognize that, unfortunately, people are being shot and or killed on a much too consistent basis. With the support of the community and our partners across the city, we'll achieve our vision for every Philadelphian to be safe from gun violence in their communities, with full access to opportunities to create their path to a fulfilling life. And now, Mayor Jim Kenney will come up and speak.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and I'm glad that we have such a large crowd here to discuss our ongoing plans to continue to try to push down this gun violence and homicide in our city. It'll be a new approach to tackling one of the most difficult challenges our city faces, the epidemic of violence. Our plan may be new, but this issue is far from it. Violence has unfortunately plagued Philadelphia for generations now. We're doing everything we can to change that. These past 3 years, we've taken big steps to address violence in our communities. We launched the Community Crisis Intervention Program, which deploys prevention teams in neighborhoods that use respected messengers from the very community to intervene and diffuse tensions before incidents turn to violence. We've expanded the Youth Violence Reduction Partnership to provide needed supports to young people most at risk of gun violence, with the goal of connecting them to more positive experiences. We've invested in more alternatives to incarceration, treatment, and rehabilitative programming through the MacArthur Grant. But despite all of this, clearly more needs to be done. We need a new approach, one that looks at violence through the lens of public health. Last September, I called upon members of our cabinet and senior leadership to place on my desk a plan for how we will dramatically reduce the killings and shootings in our city. We sought to map out a more robust and comprehensive response to violence that focuses on prevention as well as enforcement and reentry. We must get away from the mindset that policing is the only answer to this problem. It was also important that we relied on data and science to identify the most effective strategies to address these issues. As we were developing this plan, we all sat down with many, many residents who have been deeply impacted by violence in neighborhoods across the city to hear their concerns and their ideas. Based on their feedback and research conducted by the Office of Violence Prevention, we now have a strong set of actionable recommendations to present to you today. These recommendations recognize that violence is ultimately a symptom of the larger crisis of pervasive poverty in Philadelphia. They call for addressing the inequities in communities most prone to violence, investing in intelligence-based and community-oriented policing, as well as better supporting the reintegration of formerly incarcerated individuals. We are committed to investing $4.4 million over the next 6 months to begin implementation of these recommendations, and that's just the start of funding. I will present our budget to City Council early March. At that time, I will propose a more significant commitment to implementing this plan, and I look forward to continued conversations with Council on these investments as they review the entire budget and the 5-year plan. You'll soon be hearing all about all of these recommendations in more detail. I want to thank Vanessa Garrett Harley, Theron Pride, and the rest of our team for their hard work in putting this plan together. And I want to thank members of City Council that are here today, especially Council President Clark, Curtis Jones, Kenyatta Johnson, Bill Greenlee. I don't know if anyone else is here, but they are all been in the forefront of this issue, pushing us every day. We need their support and their wisdom going forward. And I'm pleased to accept their findings, look forward to working with all of our partners to start implementing them as soon as possible. We simply can't wait any longer. One life lost to violence is one too many. I want to thank you, and now before we hear from Theron to walk us through these particular plans, I just want to say that the hundreds of people that we met with in the course of this process, and the moms and dads and brothers and sisters that we heard from, and the heartbreak that they feel that they'll never get over, and the loss of their loved ones. I met a woman who lost 2 sons. And to listen to their pain, we must commit ourselves to making these young men our children also, as we did when we started our PHL Pre-K and our Rebuild program. We've taken ownership of all of our young babies to get them where they need to be. Now we need to intervene and get our arms around the young people who resort to violence as a result of just daily interactions, drugs, and other things. They are our children also. We owe it to them, and we want to see this homicide trend going down as it was up until 2017, and we want to get it back on track, declining, and our ultimate aspirational goal is 0. And we want to thank you all for all your help. There will be continued interaction with the community through the course of this process. We will have quarterly meetings with stakeholders to get feedback and to change and adjust what we do. But we are committed to this. We are serious about this. And we're willing to invest the money necessary to get it done. So I want to thank you all for being here today, and I'd like to ask Theron to come up and walk you through it.
Good morning, everybody. Again, I'm Theron Pride. I'm the Senior Director with the Office of Violence Prevention. And I'm honored to have the opportunity to walk you through a 100-day effort that really is an example of the commitment in the city of Philadelphia to end this. Not simply prevent and reduce, but to end it, as the mayor said, one life lost is too many. This process, though very quick, my experience working previously with the Department of Justice and the Obama administration, this usually took months to do. But everyone in this city came together in a way that I had not seen in other jurisdictions, to partner, to share, to collaborate. And I think this is the first step to many conversations and other action items that we will roll out. And so I will take the few moments that I have to cover at a high level of what we've talked about in this plan, but I certainly encourage you to get a copy, to go online, to download it, to look closer at it, to further critique and to further engage with us in terms of this is the city's plan. But we recognize that it's not just the city that has work to do. It's all of us. It's everyone in all the communities of Philadelphia to come together to solve this. This is a problem that impacts all of us. We start off with this roadmap as a way forward, as a first step in a journey of many more steps to come. So with that, I'll go to the first slide in the presentation to just tell you that how we try to define the issue. And I'll be clear with you that I know that when we talk about numbers, behind numbers are real lives. So I don't want to minimize the fact that lives have been lost, and for many of you in the room who've been impacted by this, I don't want this to be a cold presentation. But the reality is, We do see that a lot of this violence is happening in communities that have high rates of poverty. The mayor has said this to us repeatedly, that we have got to find a way to address this issue. In the map that you see in this slide, the green dots and the yellow dots and the red dots point out the shootings and the homicides. And then those dark blue, dark purple areas on that map is where poverty is concentrated at the highest. And you'll see in our report that it maps almost perfectly in terms of where the highest levels of poverty are. There also you find the most homicides and shootings. We also found that approximately 75% of those who are shot or who are the ones doing the shooting are black males, and that they're most commonly between the ages of 16 and 34. We also found that the individuals involved in gun violence have obviously complex histories, as many of you know, and a majority have had prior contact with city government and the criminal justice system, all of which, in looking at the problem, tells us there's a real opportunity to get to individuals well before the shooting happens. We meet these folks. We know these individuals with our partners in law enforcement, with our community partners working with them in the organizations that serve community, with the city agencies that touch these lives. We have an opportunity here to get to these individuals much earlier. Let's go to the next slide. So, because we took a look at the data and we tried to understand who is most at risk and who is most affected by this violence, we know it has no bounds in terms of the pain felt. But we were able to identify that these young men between 16 and 34, largely men of color, are the ones that we should pay special attention to. Not that black men are inherently dangerous. Let me be clear. Black men are not inherently dangerous. If you look around this room right now, you'll see a lot of accomplished black men in this room. But there are young men in our city who, because of the circumstances that they face every day and the choices, though very difficult, they have to make, find themselves caught up in a cycle of violence. We want to look at the families, the neighborhoods, the neighbors, the service providers that touch the lives of these young people, particularly these young males of color between the ages of 16 and 34. Next slide. So using a public health approach, trying to come with a holistic solution and looking at this population that so needs our help and support, we laid out a vision that says every Philadelphian will be safe from gun violence in their communities with full access to opportunities to create their path to a fulfilling life. It's not enough to have a reduction or prevent gun violence. There needs to be something in place of that. The opposite of gun violence is opportunity. Let me say that again. The opposite of gun violence is opportunity. Where there is opportunity, gun violence has a harder chance to rear and occur. So within that vision, we have four goals that guided our work with our partners in community, with our partners across the city. We came up with these large buckets to kind of organize our thinking in terms of how would we achieve this vision of every Philadelphian being safe from gun violence with full access to opportunities. We said there needs to be more connection and thriving youth and young adults in the city. We know that there needs to be stronger community engagement and partnerships. We need to have more coordinated city services and planning. And we needed to have safer and healthier neighborhoods. Those were some of the key goals that we needed to achieve if we wanted to reach our vision. Next slide. And so within that framework of those four large goals and that vision, we offered up some key recommendations to the mayor, who was very clear that we had to get this done in 100 days. And so we wanted to go back to the mayor and be clear in terms of what we needed, because we know that he was going to hold our feet to the fire if we don't get this done in terms of also implement it. And so we offered key recommendations at the top to say clearly what we have to do at a minimum just to get this to where it needs to be. So first and foremost, we need to promote community health and well-being by prioritizing the reduction of structural violence. It's those things in community that often go unfelt, but you see it, you know it. They impact lives, they harm lives and families. We have to get at the root causes of those structures, those institutions that serve as barriers and constraints to people meeting their basic needs. That's key. We also need to build on the administration's successful criminal justice reforms by improving reentry programs and services. As I said earlier, in defining the issue and looking at the problem, we know people are touched by the criminal justice system before they find themselves a shooter or a victim of a homicide. There's a real opportunity for us to improve reintegration so that people are successful and thriving in their communities when they return, as one more way, as a key strategy in terms of getting ahead of this gun violence. And of course, we need to invest in additional analytical capacity and technology to implement what we'll refer to as Operation Pinpoint that Commissioner Ross will talk about a little bit later. But it's key that in prevention, we partner with law enforcement to have a very focused approach on those who are most high risk, and they need the tools to do that pinpoint strategy in regards to who are the individuals we need to be most concerned about. And so building that capacity out, to getting them to a level where they have what they need to better help us focus on where we need to put our limited resources is key. So those are the three key recommendations. Next slide. And so, of course, even with those three, in our report, you'll see that there's further things delineated under each of those three that I mentioned. But we go further. This was a group that was not short on aspiration or ambition. And so we laid out within the 4 goals broader action items that we also wanted to take. And at the top, in those goals that I talked about earlier, we certainly want to see that when we talk about connection and thriving youth and young adults, we want to ensure that young men in particular, at the highest risk of gun violence, between the ages of 16 and 34, and their families, have a clear path to proven prevention and intervention programs. Those are the people we need to reach. And if we're talking about everyone in this city being connected to the supports they need and thriving, we need to focus on these young men. We also, when we talk about coordination of city services, we need to use police and health and other data to better identify the people and places driving the violence in our communities and more effectively target policies, programs, and services to address these issues. As I said before, working with police and our other partners at public health, we want to be able to better use the data we have access to really identify where best to direct our resources. It's not enough to say everyone gets the same thing. There are certain folks who face particular challenges who need additional help, and we need to be able to do that in a very effective way. We also need to invest resources in programs and services and infrastructure that help to promote the safety, health, and wellness of all Philadelphians. If we're going to have safer neighborhoods, we have to make sure, even at a physical level in community, things improve. And we certainly need to increase public awareness of the root causes of gun violence and focus initiatives in communities at the highest risk. If we're going to have strong community engagement and partnership, we need to be working with community to identify where they see the needs and make sure, again, we're focusing our attention on those areas. So the last slide. I'll close my remarks by saying this ultimately is the illustration of the vision. You see in this picture young men of color graduating with opportunity and promise. You see faces that are bright and smiling. This is where the city of Philadelphia needs to go. This will not happen overnight. We didn't get to here overnight. It will be a long process. But if we all work together and come together on following through on this roadmap and bringing our resources that we have collectively to this issue, that's the picture we can see on every young person in Philadelphia, including our young men of color. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, everyone. All right, so obviously a very serious issue when we deal with each and every day. Philadelphia Police Department, like most police departments, recognizes that there's no singular panacea for the prevalence of, or dealing with the prevalence of gun violence on our streets. So that being said, what we're instituting is something that Theron mentioned called Operation Pinpoint, which combines effective elements of community-oriented and intelligence-led policing models that you see all across this nation, many of which that we've employed over the years. Operation Pinpoint is a multifaceted crime-fighting and information-sharing strategy designed to identify, collect, analyze, and disseminate information. Officers and commanders will use this information to target the most violent offenders and the areas most affected by violent crime. Operation Pinpoint integrates all that we know about policing our neighborhoods and in a planned, targeted, and measurable way. Pinpoint combines something you've heard called hotspot policing, offender focus, problem solving, and community policing. Pinpoint utilizes data, technology, and on-the-ground experience. Pinpoint is a data-driven and evidence-based, but also includes crucial input from experienced officers and investigators in the field. Information gathered is evaluated in real time and is actionable intelligence is provided to officers and commanders on a daily basis. Field officers will receive pinpoint intelligence from crime analysts before and during their tours. In turn, they will patrol these targeted areas and collect information from their observation, witnesses, community members, and offenders in the areas. Operation Pinpoint will augment our existing crime prevention and response strategies and initiatives, and we believe will have an appreciable impact on gun violence in Philadelphia. So I know you will have questions later, but at this time, I know I'm supposed to call up Councilman Jones and Kenyatta Johnson, but obviously we have the council president here and Councilman Greenlee. I don't know who else is coming up, but
We do. Who closer to you better? First of all, Mr. Mayor, I want to thank you for putting together with your staff an outline for addressing this crisis. I often say with my colleagues in chambers, if 300 whales washed up on the shore of the Schuylkill River, every marine biologist in the world would come to Philadelphia to figure out why so many whales had died. We average about 300 murders a year. Right here in Philadelphia, multiply that by the other big cities, you can see this epidemic being built. This is a good start. But let me tell you, this is the relationship with the grassroots groups. Bilal Qayyum every day, I don't answer his calls right away until I look at the news nowadays to see what has happened over the weekend. I used to answer, you just want to see you call me. I avoid that now. But let me tell you why. I walk my dog every morning, Captain Jack Jones. He is more recognized in my community than me. We walk of a corner that I used to stand on at 54th and Euclid. There's a young man at that time of day. He's ending his shift. He was ending his shift. I was beginning my day. And he would look at me when he saw me. He would want to run, but he didn't. He manned up and said, "You caught me. I'm here again." And we had a long conversation, and all he really wanted, he ran that corner, all he really wanted was a job. He said, "This is no fun for me, old head. This is not the kind of life I picked out when I was in middle school, but I don't know what's left for me." While you were writing this report, and I'm glad it's done, that man was shot to death on that same corner. So my colleague and I, about the urgency of time, and this mayor understands we got to do this now. Because every year, every month that we delay, someone, and often more than one, wind up victims of this. So as we looked at some of these aspects of the program, I'm excited about the potential for them because it covers the major food groups that the best prevention of gun violence is a job. Mike Joins. I've never met a $50,000 a year gangbanger. So as we look at these links to the change, I see the head of the school district here. He's a part of that. He was there. Oh, there he is. So, I would have gave it up too. So the school to prison pipeline is real. Reentry is real. Where's my man jumpsuit? Where is he at? So he was in that room when I found out that boy got killed. We were up at, I didn't know you were from Winfield until you showed up. But I found that out. So yesterday we were doing this. You'll hear from Councilman Johnson, we don't watch the news the same way anymore between my district, Council President's district, and Janie Blackwell's district, we watch the news to say, first, we pray for the soul that was taken. And the second thing, we want to know the geography of where it was taken, because we know we have to do certain things after that. So I'm excited, Mr. Mayor, and I'm thankful that for the first time in my recollection since Safe Streets, there is a plan that is coherent. I know when we're talking about saving the environment that we are, what the 3 steps we want to do. If you talk about economic development in our chambers, I know what we're going to do. When we talk about education, I know what we're going to do. For the first time in a long time, we have a game plan. It's not perfect, but it's a beginning. Thank you.
Echoing the comments of my colleague, I'm going to thank Vanessa and her team for leading this effort. Can we give them a round of applause first and foremost, because the mandate by the mayor was for 100 days, and they came to the table yesterday rolling out their plans with their recommendations. And we all know as a city right now, we're in a state of emergency. We are in a state of an emergency. So I thank the mayor for not only charging his team to come up with a plan, but most importantly, stepping up with a budget proposal and the resources to allow us to execute this plan. As Councilman Curtis Jones mentioned, we have community groups organizing on the ground day in, day out, trying to prevent young men from killing one another. But I'm also happy that our commissioner has resources to make sure we find out where these guns are coming from. No gun factories in Point Breeze or Strawberry Mansion. And so in order for us to reduce this level of crime and violence that we're seeing in the city of Philadelphia, it's going to take all of us to step up to the plate to get involved. After this press conference, I'm going to another press conference in South Philadelphia, where we have a Stop the Violence mural at Ralph Brooks Tot Lot at 20th and Tasker Street. This is a mural that I watched since I've been a young man growing up in South Philadelphia after I lost my own cousin to gun violence and started my own organization called Peace Not Guns. But the point is, this mural has about 30 young people who were murdered in the streets of South Philadelphia. And so it's ironic that we're doing this press conference today here to address the same issue I've been dealing with since I've been a young man growing up in South Philadelphia. So, Mr. Mayor, we thank you and your team for stepping up to the plate, and the members of City Council. Councilman Clark, he's been focusing on stopping where these guns are coming from. Because as a young man growing up, I remember you would get a revolver, Councilman Jones. A revolver, Bilal. The average young person today carry a 45, AR-15. If we don't get to the bottom of where these guns are coming from, Commissioner, I watched on the news the other day, some guys were outside in the snow and got out and they blazing and shooting like they in some land that's not being regulated. So from the law enforcement standpoint, sir, we need to find out where these guns are coming from and let those who shoot indiscriminately, because I have 2 young sons growing up who are African-American young men. And I have to recognize as a father, not a politician, as a father, their chances of becoming young adults are based upon the job that we do here in the city of Philadelphia that will allow them to give a chance to follow their goals, their dreams, and their aspirations. So for me, this is not politics. This is something I believe in. I thank everyone for this particular task force and this report, but now we got work to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Councilman, you talked about when you were growing up, people were able to get revolvers. When I was growing up, people actually had zip guns, so that tells me I go back a little ways. I'm just saying. But I say that to say that the simple reality is this violence is not new. There was violence. There will always be some level of violence. But the level of violence that we're experiencing today is a different type of violence. A man getting shot in the face, Commissioner, last night, because I guess he only had $20. I mean, what is that about, right? What is that about? I mean, this is a different breed, Mayor, you know, and I just want to say that I'm glad that we're standing here today, this level. You look at the people in this room, cross-section of people. Most people have been talking about this forever. You know, we've had a couple of meetings to discuss on the street presence. We obviously talked about the need to put additional resources for the police department. We talked about the fact that we got to deal with the underlying problem is lack of opportunity, people not having a sense that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Some of this stuff is generational, right? And that's a reality. But today we're here, and I'm seeing the level of commitment that we need to make, right? The willingness to do. Mayor, I'm assuming on your budget message you'll be asking us to, you know, pass a little money. It's coming, right? All right. You'll probably get the appropriate office, and we'll be responsible for whipping the votes for that. But the reality is today, I'm pleased at the level of commitment that I'm seeing, the need to understand that this is a comprehensive approach. There is no one entity that can solve this. It has to be everybody in this room. As I look across the room, I see a lot of individuals that have been out there grinding. I see a number of people that are in the enforcement issue, a number of people in the social services working together. I think we can get this done. We got to make a dent, because at the end of the day, we will never be the city that we think we are until we create a safer community for everybody. So I just want to thank everybody here today. God bless you all. We're going to do what we have to do. Thank you.
So at this time, we're going to ask Shantae Love, who is the program director for Every Murder is Real, or MIR, Healing Center, to come up. Shantae has been working with us, and actually we kicked off our community listening tours, as I call them. And that was, we tried to go out to the community in all of the various areas of the city who have been experiencing an uptake in both the shootings and the homicides. So we've been all over the city, North Philly, South Philly, West, Southwest. But we kicked it off up in Germantown with Shantae, and so she's going to come and bring you some perspectives from the community. Thank you, Shantae.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you all for all of us gathering in this moment. I'm from Every Murder is Real, and community-based healing center that impacts families impacted by homicide and violent crimes. When we decided to come together, can I have my brother Bilal? Could you join me? My brother Anton, my brother Terry. When we decided, yes, my brother, because when a community hurts together, we must heal together. This, like our elected officials, I want to thank you, because they did a tour around the city, met with community partners. What we did was come with a comprehensive, holistic, trauma-informed approach that connects the dots. See, the fabric of our communities is being ripped apart. The resiliency band has been stretched thin. And it was a requirement, it was a desire, it was necessary for that the rubber meets the road. Is that community partners like my brothers that stand behind me, that we've been in this fight to save a race of people for a long time. And for our elected officials and Office of Violence Prevention, to say, listen, let's all put our hats together. Let's all come together. It's profound for not only our city, but other states that are looking at us. Because we create leadership. We make differences. We make things happen here. And so something horrible has been happening in our communities. And in order for us to make this happen, community investment had to happen. And for elected officials to say, listen, we need to come together as one. You don't see this across the country. Not like this. My partners, we've been in this struggle for many years. And we have said, guess what? Today, right now, that our communities, our black and brown brothers and sisters, we needed to save a race, and we needed some support. So the ideal of infusing some support and some resources, also bringing our evidence-based models to the forefront, that we do this collectively. Community, law enforcement, politics. We grasp the community. We are the pulse. And it is required that we hear the voices. And so we've screamed loud, and they've heard our call. No, it might not be perfect, but it's a start. And we must all band around it together, investing in our communities that come from people that look like us, that understands us, that can deliver messages of hope and healing. This is what we're doing. All of us talking together, the same language, sharing information. See, us community partners, we share. But this opportunity here for us to do something phenomenal so that the dreams don't die, so that I don't say there once was a black man. What I'm saying is that we are fabric, we are connected like a quilt, and that the families that grow, that will thrive, that will have the opportunities, shall survive. And that's important. And that's important. And that the resources that come behind it, as City Council say, yes, we're behind it, because it's comprehensive. It allows voices to be heard. It allows the impact of what we're doing to be real. I know a lot of people say, we done heard this, but no, this is different. This is different, because we've all said we're coming together as one, because every murder is too real, and every life is too important. And then I say once again, we hurt together, we heal together, we thrive, we live, we grow, we succeed, and we are powerful. I want to thank you, Mayor, for allowing us to kick that off, solution-driven. And we're in this together. Thank you very much.
Shantae, we thank you for that. All of these people that you saw standing here and all the brothers who were supporting her are all people who have been very nice to me, have hosted me as I went out into these communities to figure out what was going on. We call it a listening tour because nobody knows better than the community what's going on in the community, right? And they told us what went on, and they also came up with some viable solution. And there are many more in this room that we do want to say thank you to. Also, I want to say thank you to, there's so many people here that have helped tremendously. The work group had leadership from all of the major agencies in the city, and I see some of the commissioners here. A special thank you to Dr. Farley from the health department, so that we came at this from that public health directive. But I have to tell you, Dr. Farley, my brother, Renard Washington, who's chief of epidemiology, we could not have done this without Renard. Even when I called him at 1 in the morning, he answered. And so I want to say thank you to Renard especially. I see Supervising Judge of Criminal Court Tucker is here supporting and is also the chairperson of CJAB, which is phenomenal. I see other judiciary here, Judge Murphy and Judge Olszewski, and they have that juvenile justice component. Dr. Height, thank you so much. I know how difficult it was for Dr. Height to come, but the education is a key part of that plan and how we deal with and educate our folks. And I'm only calling out a few people, but I just want you guys to see that everybody is committed to doing this work and working together holistically. So at this time, we'll conclude. We have a few minutes if any members of the press have questions. So his question was, could I talk a little bit about how we engage the public and what kind of input we got from folks in the community? Initially, my Office of Violence Prevention are I call them boots on the ground. They're kind of out there in the street, so they know a lot of the folks in the different communities. Some of it was based on folks who came up to them. Sometimes I got emails or phone calls from people who said, I understand you're in this position. Now, I've only been here 6 months, but I want to help you, right? I hear you want to do something different. So we would follow up those phone calls or emails, or they would identify people. Ultimately, they would pull together community meetings, and there would be a variety of folks there from the various communities. So we've been to North Philly, South Philly, one or two places in South Philly, West Philly, Southwest, and a few other places, Germantown, other places. We also did targeted focus groups. So we met with trying to get input from young people, because that's real important to me, and many in the room know I have that kind of child welfare, juvenile justice background. We went to meet with young people who unfortunately are incarcerated and being charged as adults who had gun crimes, did a special focus group with them. We met with the juvenile lifers. These are gentlemen who have served, some of them have served 45 years in jail, got out recently when that Supreme Court decision was done, and they really want to help. Met with some of the groups in conjunction with the Mayor's Commission on Youth at some of the high schools and others to get input from there. I don't have them all off the top of my head, but we met with a significant number, focused to get information, but also across the department. Now, what will come out, this is not one and done. It's not a plan that's going on the desk. I know you haven't had time to read it yet. It does contain a governance structure. In that structure is an implementation team, which we plan to get started in February. Continuing meetings to make sure that the plan gets implemented. And part of that is we're going to be doing quarterly meetings with the community and giving a quarterly update on the progress of the plan and the recommendations. But I still have many, many more meetings planned with community folks and other focus groups that we're still planning to do. Yes, sir. I didn't hear the question. Could you say it one more again?
Where's it coming from? Can we transfer it? Well, Vanessa will tell you what it's going to be used for. It's coming from a transfer ordinance that will be introduced in council, and then we'll walk through the process of the budget and commit to funding as necessary all of these programs in the next budget. So this will get us through this fiscal year, and then budget address will be March 1st or 2nd. Then we'll go through that budget process and then make sure that the funds are in place for next year. We'll have that discussion with council. I don't want to get ahead of the budgeting process. Council will have their input and their priorities, and we'll base the price tag on what we come up with in the end. But the commitment is there for millions of dollars to continue this through for the next 5 years at least.
And so just to answer your question on what the $4.4 million is being used for, that is because we recognize the urgency of what's going on right now. And so that's this fiscal year, FY19. So prior to June 30th, the commitment is for $4 million. There is a outside funding included in that 4.4 is $2 million from Philadelphia Works, committed to workforce development funding and additional job training, job readiness, and employment contracts. So that's $2 million of it. An additional targeted, we call them targeted community investment grants. Some folks might call them micro grants of another $250,000. And I already have 250, so let's say 500,000 that will be going into the communities. There are a lot of good organizations and groups who have been doing work in the communities, not getting resourced or funded, that we want to be able to work with so that they can continue the work that they're doing. 2,000 of it is money that has been identified from the Department of Public Health, who are creating an injury prevention unit that will do many things, but also do homicide death review so that we can learn from the additional homicides as many other cities and jurisdictions are doing. There will be an expansion of the Community Crisis Intervention Program. $500,000 is headed towards that. We are currently in 4 areas of the city, but we want to be able to geographically expand. That's the new program that we started in July of 2018. Those staffers who work for a CCIP work non-traditional hours and days. They work from Thursday through Sunday, 6 p.m. to 4 a.m., because when we look at the crime data, those are the times and dates where the crime most occurs. So a $500,000 expansion of that, and also for police technology upgrades so that we can talk about adding additional surveillance cameras and some of the other intel needs, so we can begin that process of adding some of the intelligence so that we can take advantage of the intelligence from the police and also community intelligence. And then YVRP, which is the Youth Violence Reduction Partnership, which is a specialized probation and parole that identifies those at highest risk of either killing or being killed. We are in many police districts right now, but we're in several police districts. We'd like to be in more, $250,000 expansion for that with some additional staffing so that we can move into other districts. So that's, if that answers your question in terms of the breakdown.
Well, admittedly, some of the evidence-based stuff is things we were doing, but what we're doing is kind of collating it all together, particularly as it relates to some of the offender focus. We were doing that, but realizing that we need to drill down even further and really reach out and touch folks. So just as an example, it's already underway. For some, it's not just about stopping people on the street. In fact, that's not even most of it. It's literally about knocking on people's doors who we think are going to be targets, who may be shooters, and literally letting them know of our concern for their well-being and the fact that we are very much aware of their circumstances. So it is a blend of a lot of what we've been doing, using the evidence-based and intelligence model. With me here is Chief Inspector Dan McDonald. What we are candidly doing, he is one of the architects of Pinpoint, and just to give you a snapshot of who he is, in addition to being an experienced Chief Inspector, Dan is also a career military guy who has served 3 tours overseas in Afghanistan and Iraq, where he is an intel officer in the United States Army. And so, Dan, I don't know if you just want to speak a little bit about just some of the components without getting too much in the weeds, but we can obviously follow up later about what we're doing relative to training, what we're doing relative to some of the more nuanced things that we're implementing in the program.
Yeah, the police commissioner established the Intelligence Bureau that I currently manage about 22 months ago. In that time, we looked at all the policing models that we were currently using and brought in some of the best civilian and police personnel to come in and take a look at the crime problems, identified the best models that worked, found that different models worked in different parts of the city, and then started bringing in data scientists to help us lay this all out. Once we've done that, the police commissioner had us then apply those models around the city, and that's what we're doing now. So it takes all of the information that we currently have about crime in the city of Philadelphia, brings it into one location where it's looked at by civilians and police personnel, identify and make predictions on what's going to happen next, and then we let the commanding officers in the patrol districts, the detective bureau, deploy early to create interventions and prevent this sort of stuff from happening. We're in the early stages now, and it's shown some real good success there, but it's what we've done before in a much more streamlined, faster fashion than we've been able to do in the past.
And before you go in there, just one additional thing. I think, and Vanessa outlined the fact that, you know, some of the plan involves getting additional civilian analysts, which is critical. And so we're excited about that for 2 reasons. And we can't say enough about, you know, how flexible the men and women in the sworn ranks are in terms of filling those capacities. But civilians will offer an advantage that we won't necessarily be able to use with our police officers. One, they do look at things a little differently. I mean, most of them have been trained from an educational standpoint to be crime analysts. We have kind of been compelled to force police officers in a multitude of different roles, which they've done in a stellar fashion. In addition to which, what that is a force multiplier, because once you get these people, some of the police officers can now go back and they can work in a different kind of intel capacity that will enable us to put them out on the street in different ways.
How is this different from models across the country related to predictive policing, using data scientists and surveillance cameras and facial recognition? How is this different? Or were there any similarities?
I think there's more similarities than there are differences. So I think what you see in law enforcement, first of all, I think like any other industry, whether it be the medical industry or legal, you know, we sit around quarterly, the 70 largest police agencies, Philadelphia being one of them, and we talk about, you know, what's the latest in crime analysis and what are we doing relative to predictive policing. and what technology can you leverage to help you. This is fluid. And so what we try to do is not rest on our laurels, recognizing, look, some of you may or may not know, and with regard to evidence-based policing, we've been working on a myriad of projects going back at least 6-7 years with Temple University. Footbeats was one where we've got some national recognition on, how well those things can work. So the blend is not necessarily new, but as Dan said, the streamlined focus of it in terms of getting this intel out, and as I'm saying, particularly as it relates to offender focus, really letting people know on the ground, explaining how we can engage people, knowing who they are, particularly before they get involved. Some of you also know, and it sounds like it's a bit off the beaten path, but for us, it's about using a multitude of approaches, not the least of which is even helping people get employment, because we understand those opportunities, and because some of our folks know some of these individuals very well on these corners, they're trying to get them out of harm's way as well. So recognizing that is just many things you have to do. It's not one, but we are not in any way resting on our laurels, nor is it something brand new to us with regard to intelligence-led policing or evidence-based policing.
Just to follow up, are you guys leaving on the table the idea of using artificial intelligence or facial recognition software in Facebook?
Well, artificial intelligence is something we would use anyway, and so we already employ facial recognition. And so one of the things or some of the many things we're going to be able to do with some of this money is again, leveraging technology. Sometimes it's just a matter of improving what you have out there. You heard someone mention about the cameras. We have cameras, and arguably what some don't know, this city, although sometimes cash-strapped, we've got some super bright people. And so under the auspices of Mike Vidro and OIT and places like that, he actually built his own cameras that, to me, probably rival ShotSpotter that many of you have heard of, where, this is actually tied to the audio aspect and the camera spins. We don't have a lot of them. These are things that we're looking to increase. So it's not something new in that case. That's something about augmentation and enhancement, and that's what we're excited about. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So one of the aspects of Pinpoint does deal with working with our state and federal partners, particularly our federal partners. They're really excited about partnering with us relative to gun trafficking and dealing with just gun crime. We've got a new U.S. attorney in William McSwain on board who is very, very excited about assisting us, and he's really charged his AUSAs as well as the local SACs from the FBI, ATF, DEA, and so forth to really assist us. So we're excited about that because it will involve multiple people and multiple entities in order to get this done. Trafficking guns is done slightly different than it's been done in years past. Many people may know, the days of tractor-trailer loads of guns coming, and it doesn't even happen that way. The ATF will tell you, whether it be in the form of guns that are stolen from gun shops outside of the city, whether it be in the form of people who legally are licensed to have a gun, but they get them stolen and things of that nature. So this is why I have systematically and routinely, when I'm speaking to you even, in the mornings when you grab me, ask even for people who are legally licensed to carry a firearm to make sure that you safeguard that firearm so that it doesn't become an illegal firearm in the hands of someone who shouldn't otherwise possess it. So there are a myriad of things that we're doing with our partners. I just had a meeting the other day with Attorney General Josh Shapiro, and it happened to be with my pastor, Alan Waller, and some other folks that were present, and it was all about this gun violence thing, because everybody wants to be a part of it. Everybody knows that they have to play some role. Your role might be very different than the next agency. You could be in a nonprofit. You could be a coach. You could be an employer. It doesn't matter what it is. You have to, as, Vanessa has done, and look, I'm going to do it again. Please just indulge me. Give her another hand. She worked so hard on this. She really, really did. And so she talked about this, and everyone else talked about the need to have a multifaceted approach, and that's what we're going to do. Again, You know, a lot of it's not brand new, but you always have to figure out just a more nuanced way to approach it. And I think that's what a lot of it is. But it is about resources, too. It's anybody, you know, it was already mentioned before, no one can kid yourself about the fact that you can have the best laid plans in the world, and you touched on the term that we love, boots on the ground. You got to have the boots there, too. And the boots aren't always in this uniform. Sometimes it's in the form of some of these nonprofit folks who are out there doing this job, who go and herald it all the time, who do a lot of great work. So, but boots on the ground probably is one of the biggest force multipliers that you got above and beyond anything else. So that's a good question. So it's a couple things. Now, number one, you are well aware, Ms. Burton, that focused deterrence cannot be done without the district attorneys. Otherwise, it's not focused deterrence. We already employ or do some form of that in the form of pinpoint anyway, and even prior to pinpoint. But remember that it becomes more for us, more stick than carrot. And so you want that multifaceted approach. I keep saying that for a reason. And so you got to talk to the district attorney about, you know, what his level of interest is. But remember, too, when it comes to focusing on individuals, we have to be somewhat tactical, strategic about how we do it, because with focused deterrence, the people are on probation. And thus lies the ability to pull people in for those calls that you invariably know about. And so with us, you know, we have to just use our intel to make contact with these people, knock on doors, nothing illegal about that, just to say we're concerned about you, but that's not focused deterrence in the aspect that you're alluding to. So we are not opposed to anything like that, but just understand that we cannot do something like that unilaterally. It just doesn't work like that. We would need the district attorney, and then we would have to sit down and decide where that works most appropriately. It was a reason why we, some years back, decided to do that in South Philadelphia, because the gangs that involved were so structured, and we knew exactly who fights who all the time. And so it worked well there. There are other places that we think it could work. It may not work in others, but again, I think the important thing to underscore is that we're open to just about anything. And again, whether it be my conversation with Eddie Johnson in Chicago, Mike Moore in L.A., or Jimmy O'Neill in NYPD, these are conversations that are fluid. They have them with us, and we're always looking for new ways to do different things, and that's the bottom line.
We have time for one more question. Get this one. Yes. I would say that's a very difficult question and a very good question, and that's what we're working together to try to figure out. I'm looking at Commissioner Figueroa in the back of the room, who's Commissioner for DHS. Certainly that's something that DHS and Tameen Farlow, her deputy, have been trying to work on for a long time. How do we touch that population and show them that there is something different? One of the ways that we have found successful in our imploring, part of what our CCIP does, we implore what they call credible messengers. These are folks that I call have lived experience. Others would say they have criminal records, but they have street cred, for lack of a better word. And young people may not listen to me, they may not listen to Commissioner Ross or you, but often they have credibility with them, and they talk to them about the results of the behavior that they've done and where it got them. And so our CCIP program and other programs like that, where you employ those credible messengers, and many of the gentlemen that you saw standing up here have similar type programs where you talk about a different level of mentorship in kind of a different way, helps make that difference for some of them. So that's one of the ways of doing it, but certainly trying to, and we also have our Department of Behavioral Health, Commissioner David Jones is at the back, talking about from a trauma expert, trauma aspect, how do we get involved with that? Some of it is about the trauma that they've seen in their life. And so what is abnormal to me and you may become normal to some, right? And so how do you break that cycle in terms of normalcy? But that's what we'll talk about. But I'll let Shantae intervene.
What it is, I am those credible messages that you're talking about. And to answer the young lady's question, there
All right. And to my brother and the colleague that's in this fight, we understand that, and he's correct, is that we're investing in those, us, with Ms. Nelson, you're talking about us people in this community investing in each other and changing the image and changing the environment. Community groups that are doing it now, we need to need resources to do it more collectively and connecting the dots, having more support to do it. And it's happening in small increments. It's happening, but it needs to happen with all of us collectively and that investment happening. You're talking about having people by the people a voice, changing their image, changing the messaging, offering hope, offering opportunity, investing in the communities. And that's what we're talking about. And that does happen. And so when you do have that happen, and you have wonderful things that happen in the midst of crazy, because this is horrible. But when you have that happen, something should work, and it will work. We're talking about saving lives, opening doors, like you said, so that we all work as one, work and work, because we can have 1,000 ideals, and we are leaders all across the city. But respecting each other, saying, what you're doing there is working well, we need to help you do that. And so I think that's part of this initiative. And so getting that to change the facet, yes, but also changing the environment, buildings that are not being used, allowing us to have access to them, changing the environment, not only language-wise, but the way they see it, an opportunity, investing in the spirit. I'm talking about the spirit of a person, changing the spirit. And that only happens when you take out some of the trauma, infuse them with some hope, have them see a future, not realizing that they live for the moment, but that they can live what their moment should be, helping them dream again. And that can happen. Did that help answer your question? All right.
So we thank you all for coming. We're going to have to conclude now. Some of us will stick around in case there are additional questions. Thank you. Hey, nice to meet you. Thank you, Dr.